governments have used spent fuel waste with very complex reprocessing facilities to produce pure plutonium, which has been used for weapons. So our process will not just extract out that plutonium, it takes all of the sort of nasty long-lived waste, transuranics, with it, goes into our reactor, used as fuel. When they are used as fuel, they're fissioned, they're converted into energy. It's literally Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. You're turning matter into energy, and that material is destroyed. It no longer exists. There are still wastes produced. It's those fission product waste, but they have a much shorter life, and they only they have no radioactivity after a couple of hundred years.
Just because the facts are A, if the narrative is B and everyone believes the narrative, then B is what matters. But it's our job in our industry to speak up proudly, soberly, and to engage people in this dialogue. Those 2.5 billion people that are in energy poverty, they need us.
America cannot meet this threat alone.
If there is a single country,
of course, the world cannot meet it without America,
that is willing to
we're going to need you, the next generation, to finish the
overhaul
job.
nuclear regulation,
We need scientists to design new
and
fuels.
focus on net public
We
benefit
need engineers to invent new technologies. We
over absurd levels of radiation
need
protection,
entrepreneurs to sell those technologies.
then we will march towards this.
We need workers to operate assembly lines that hum with high-tech, zero-carbon
We have
components.
unlimited prosperity for all humans.
We need diplomats and businessmen and women and Peace Corps volunteers to help developing nations skip past the dirty phase of development and transition to sustainable sources of energy. In other words, we need you.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Fire Division podcast. Today we've got an awesome guest, Rory O'Sullivan with Moltex, CEO of Moltex, North America. Rory, how you doing?
Great. Yeah. Good morning, Mark. Great to be here.
Super excited to chat with you. We've got a lot to cover. But I wanted to start with saying it's great to chat with another mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
Some convert that's interested in the nuclear industry.
Yeah, nice. Well, I guess same path as me.
Yeah. Curious on your background before we dive into Moltex. And you've covered this kind of publicly elsewhere, but for those folks that haven't sought out information out about you, why don't you just kind of give a background about yourself and where you went to school and how'd you get your start?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. And yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to kind of see how this podcast goes. I'm very passionate about the concept of fire to fission. I gave a talk to the oil and gas industry in like 2014, just reminding people to be thankful for what oil and gas and coal has done for the economy. I mean, it's taken us, civilization, to 90% out of poverty. And really that's thanks to oil and gas. So it gets a hard rap now, but yeah, we should remember that. But it's time to progress to a new era. So yeah, I love the title, love the podcast, and excited to hear more. So I, as you mentioned there, I graduated from Trinity College Dublin with a mechanical engineering degree, actually a double degree from l'INSA de Lyon in France too. And I graduated anti-nuclear because everyone in Ireland is anti-nuclear. It's just the default. Nuclear is illegal there, and
just so crazy. It's
crazy
that it can be illegal somewhere, right? Yeah.
Well, lots of places actually. And I was very passionate about energy, but I wanted to work in a big city, so I moved to London and ended up working in construction and project management in the third biggest construction company in the world called Bouygues Group, and I ran sort of $50-60 million jobs, overseeing about 250 people after 8-10 years in that sector. And then some other things along the way. I did about 6 months doing housing repair post earthquake in Haiti, so developed some reconstruction repair regulations there for rebuild. There was a lot of entities doing temporary housing. We were looking at a repair. And it was around 2014, 13 maybe, when I attended a talk at the Institution of Mechanical Engineers in London on molten salt reactors. And at this point, nobody in the industry had heard of molten salt reactors, but they had the potential to deal with the waste, deal with the safety, and deal with the cost. Kind of the three issues I had, and I think most people have or perceive to have with nuclear power. So it really got me intrigued, and I spent a lot of time just learning about it. Over the next sort of 2 years, I was studying at home on nuclear physics in the evenings, yeah, for probably 2 years, and just got very excited by it. And so that led to founding a company called Energy Process Developments, which was bit of a sort of think tank consultancy organization with a few others, one of whom was an operator of the molten salt reactor experiment in Oak Ridge. But the objective was really do a feasibility study of molten salt reactors, have a look at it and see is it viable. And that's how I managed. That's how I ended up switching from kind of project management construction world into nuclear power.
I love that background, and I've had a similar career experience. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think mechanical engineering sets you up. Little plug for any students or folks, young folks listening. But I think mechanical engineering or any engineering sets you up well for project management. And then just like you said, you had early career experience of project management that it really is empowering, right? And kind of lets you see how you can take things from not existing to having like an executable product or executing on a product, right? So do you think that background helped like kind of with your role now?
Oh, most definitely, yeah. Well, any engineering degree is really very versatile. People who've gone through engineering you have a lot of choice because if people don't know what you want to do, but you're semi-technical, go into engineering because then you can, the world is your oyster. You can do a lot of different things. When I got into kind of construction project manager, I was in technical roles. It was still technical, but the real skills you learn there is problem solving, because you're just having problems all day long, and that's the real skill of it. Engineers is how to solve problems quickly.
Right. So you're running kind of your think tank consultancy, and how'd you get plugged into Moltex? What was the path there?
So Moltex was one of the technologies that we assessed, and the assessment was in partnership with the UK consultancy Fraser Nash, funded by the UK government. And so we looked at all the various molten salt reactors, and it was a slightly different field than today because the Chinese government was a big one at the time. There was some other startups that aren't around now. But it was very clear pretty early on that we didn't really need to do this expensive long feasibility study, because the Moltex technology was just way ahead of the rest in terms of likelihood for low cost scalable deployment. And Moltex at the time was really just Ian Scott, our inventor, almost in his basement, and he had his other partner John Durham, who put in the first £1 million of seed funding. And so after the study was finished and it was clearly the front runner, we were looking at ways to kind of collaborate and partner. And in the end, what made sense is I joined Moltex, and the team I'd set up for that kind of valuation moved into to Moltex to take it forward and become a real company.
Gotcha. Yeah, I listened to Ian Scott's episode. I remember when it came out on Tense Nuclear, and I wanted to reach out to him then. I was like, man, this is very innovative and super, super exciting. So, but that was all the way back in 2018 that he was chatting with the Titans guys. Like, a lot's happened since then.
Yeah, we were only moving to New Brunswick then at that point, and Ian, Ian's a joy to listen to, a joy to work with. He's a prolific inventor. He has, I think it's close to 700 patents to his name now across different industries.
And he comes from like biotech, right? He's not.
Yeah. That's right, and he can challenge nuclear experts, the best nuclear experts in the world in their field, because he's such a broad knowledge across sort of every sector. He's able to apply that to any specific challenge, which is really a remarkable asset to have. And it's just been a pleasure to learn from him over the years.
Yeah, that's awesome. So give us kind of the quick rundown of Moltex. What are you guys trying to accomplish?
So we are trying to get our molten salt reactor up and running as quick as possible, and that's in New Brunswick with our partner in New Brunswick Power, our customer partner in New Brunswick Power. We also have an associated technology that will recycle spent nuclear fuel waste. and that facility will convert the conventional spent fuel from oxide reactors, water reactors basically, into fuel for our reactor. And so the aim is the reactor will produce sustainable, clean, economic electricity using recycled fuel. So the whole model together will produce clean energy, and instead of putting more waste on the grid with the clean power, we're actually reducing the amount of waste that was there from before.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you guys have been kind enough to hopefully give us some time with some of your other folks on the team. So we'll try and dive into kind of the more technical details with them. But I'm curious on kind of the project management, process management, how you guys are thinking strategically from you. So how big is the team right now, and have you guys been growing?
We have, yeah, we've been growing pretty steadily. So our head office for Moltex Energy Canada, which is the company leading the development of this waste burner reactor, the one I just mentioned a minute ago, headquartered in New Brunswick, and we've been developing the team here since we moved about 2018. And so we have about 35 people here, and we have a sister company in the UK, Moltex Flex, that's about the same size. And so Canada has some R&D staff there in the UK, but all our engineering and leadership is all in New Brunswick, with other staff scattered across Canada and other teams in the US. Our main partners, we've decided that we really want to stay as light and small as possible. So I wanted to get to no more than 50. It's looking like now that's going to be probably 60 or a bit more. But the aim is to really be the thinkers, the architects of the system, the puppet master, and then we'll rely on our supply chain partners, engineering partners, to do the heavy lifting. So we've already picked our main partners. That's IDEM, where as a large European engineering firm with offices all over the world. They were an early investor in Moltex, so some of our early backers, and helped get us through the first few years. And now last year we have partnered with SNC-Lavalin to be our main kind of partner in Canada. So they'll be supporting us, allowing us to ramp up faster so that we can really focus on what we're really good at, that strategic, innovative thinking in the core area.
That's awesome. So I've pontificated about this model, and I think NewScale did it right, where they partner with a strategic supplier or somebody that is going to bring value to the organization, but then potentially mesh or meld or JV or share equity in some way or ownership. It sounds like you guys have found that model to be successful also.
Yeah, that's right. And who knows where it's going to go. I hope to grow the partnership of those two organizations.
Sure.
Because we're going to be, there'll be new partnerships formed as we develop. But it is really key in this for this new heavy tech sector, which is we need to be sharing risk and partnering. One company can't do this alone. It needs to be a shared initiative. So if you look at the example of the OPG project with GE Hitachi, that's really an exemplary model there, where you have a real alliance of the leadership companies with OPG, GE Hitachi, Aecon, and SNC-Lavalin, all sharing the risk, all sharing the benefits, and it has to be done like that to be able to succeed.
Well, because it's such a long design cycle to get to revenue, right? I mean, to design this extremely incredible hardware and tech, but it takes a long time to actually get it to be built and have money coming in the door, right? So.
It does, and the the venture capitalists and the regular investment community that would do this sort of thing are still, they still want apps. They still want to develop an app and 2 years later make a load of money. So investing in heavy tech is hard. It's not for the faint-hearted. Which is why governments really need to be there to bridge the gap. But the ones who do take the risks, the opportunities are phenomenal. I mean, the hell of a lot bigger than an app.
It's true. The upside on this is going to be significantly bigger than a SaaS model, right?
for the ones who make it.
Yeah. Awesome. So what are some of your key objectives that you guys are trying to accomplish in the next, say, 1, 2, and 5 years?
Yeah. So the big objective for us is getting the validation rigs of the WATSS. Process the WATSS is the name of the facility or process to convert spent oxide fuel into our chloride fuel for our molten salt reactor. And so we've got various experiments going on now. We in our own lab we've done pretty much all of the small scale uranium experiments with sim fuel, it's called. So it's low activity, it's not real spent fuel. And at the moment now we're doing the real spent fuel tests. And over the next few years we'll be scaling that up to get better and better data as you get towards the real commercial facility. Of course, as you know, nuclear regulation requires that you have to have everything tested before you operate. So there's a lot of you need all the data before you can do the commercial facility. So that's really the priority. You know, then we got the reactor side, and relatively the reactor's kind of easy. I mean, we're probably the most innovative advanced reactor, but it's you can't really have any real innovation in nuclear power because of the way regulation is. You have to build on existing data. So we've got lots of validation rigs to do for the reactor, but the science is all done. There's no new science here. So that's just ongoing. They're the two main projects. On the reactor, we will be doing the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission's vendor design review phase 2. We've completed phase 1, and we're preparing for that at the moment. And then, you know, that's on the specific activities. On the softer side, there's a lot of work to do on building the team and making sure the team is really productive, efficient, and effective with the right management system, and that we're a credible nuclear company that can get through a regulatory process. And that has been a huge challenge, and we've got a long way to go. What we've set up internally is we had the two projects, the WATSS project and the reactor, SSRW, but now we've got a third project called the infrastructure project, which is a dedicated team to making sure the organization is able to scale up appropriately to do this, because we need over 300 people in a couple of years to be able to progress the designs, getting into detailed design and full licensing.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. And would that 300-person team be in-house employees or have contractors?
No, the model is really that smaller number. We'd be maybe 60 people. The kind of puppet master, maybe that could end up a little more. And then the lion's share will be SNC-Lavalin and the engineering support. So SNC-Lavalin, IDM, and maybe some others for specialist skills that we need here and there. And then when you get into towards construction, it's into the much larger numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to circle back to kind of your guys' strategy about small scale experiments, because you mentioned this on I guess the interview that you did with Titans a couple of years ago. And because I mean you kind of went over it very quickly, but I think it's really smart. Meaning you identified some small scale experiments that you can do in house, and then I assume those need to be scaled up a little bit to be more in line with the size that you expect them to be. And is that correct?
Yeah, so they're just you want to start out small, and
right.
But on the spent fuel side, it's all about maximizing the tests you can do without having to use real spent fuel in a hot cell, because each experiment is a few $1 million. So you really don't want to be getting it wrong. You've got to minimize the time in there, and there's a lot you can do without real spent fuel, and then use it to validate at the end.
Yeah, Coming from the oil and gas space, we understand doing experiments for a few $1 million, meaning, hey, let's drill this well a little differently. Oh, well, that was a $10 million test, and it didn't work. But we've got the benefit, at least in the shale industry, of there's still revenue after you do the experiment most of the time.
That definitely helps.
Catastrophic failure. So, would you guys then take that data to like labs and scale it up or get it validated? Or I mean, how are you guys thinking about interfacing with labs, or will you need to get more of this data?
So we have some of the earlier smaller experiments were done, I said, in our lab and at the university. So University of New Brunswick did some of our early WATSS experiments with uranium, and then now it's we won't be doing the real spent fuel experiments. That's done at the National Nuclear Labs. So at the moment it's done at the Canadian Nuclear Labs north of Ottawa, Chalk River.
Gotcha.
We have other work going on with several of the US labs. So we've done some of the molten salt chemistry work with Oak Ridge. We're doing a lot of physics, safety analysis, thermal, hydraulic work with Argon, and then worked with some of the others too. But we will definitely be leveraged. We need the support of the labs, kind of across all three nations: the UK, Canada, and the US, because they're the ones with the capabilities and the specialist facilities.
Yeah. Do you guys view that as potentially being a bottleneck, or are they stacked up right now, or is it kind of easy to get in line with them?
So far it's been okay. Yeah, the hot
Yeah.
cell time. So hot cell, for people who don't know, is a facility that is very heavily shielded. So it's like a meter thick of concrete that you can have spent fuel handled with remote arms. And there's a long waiting list to get into those facilities. But we've been planning our various tests quite far out, so that's been okay so far.
Yeah, so let's just kind of give a brief overview of the WATSS program, because I think that'll be helpful for the audience to understand the process and what it's going to do.
Yeah, so what the WATSS process does, it takes spent fuel and converts it into three main outputs. The biggest one is the uranium and the cladding. So that is no longer high level waste that's radioactive for 300,000 years, because we've extracted the small amount of really long lived waste, transuranics they're called, everything above uranium on the periodic table. We've extracted those out. And so that's left with intermediate level waste, maybe even clean enough that it can be stored at surface as an asset for future re-enrichment. But the exact numbers and criteria of that will be determined as we scale up the various tests. But that's the big saving, is taking out that kind of uranium in the cladding so that it's no longer long-lived waste. You then have about 0.5% of the original spent fuel is what's called fission products. So this is the fission products are what are produced during a nuclear reaction. They're very radioactive for relatively short periods. So that is a waste stream that needs to be disposed of. You could store it at surface for 200 to 300 years, and then it would be, no radioactivity. That could be rare earth metals that could be recycled. But let's assume that's still disposed of as a waste. It's about 0.5%, as I said. And then there's the 0.5%, which is all the transuranics or long-lived 300,000 year waste, all concentrated in this smaller stream, and that's what we can put into our reactor and use as fuel. One of the main constituents of that is plutonium, which of course is a weapons risk, or historically reprocessing programs, governments have used spent fuel waste with very complex reprocessing facilities to produce pure plutonium, which has been used for weapons. So our process will not just extract out that plutonium, it takes all of the sort of nasty long-lived waste, transuranics, with it, goes into our reactor, used as fuel. When they are used as fuel, they're fissioned, they're converted into energy. It's literally Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. You're turning matter into energy, and that material is destroyed. It no longer exists. There are still wastes produced. It's those fission product waste, but they have a much shorter life, and they only they have no radioactivity after a couple of hundred years. So the long aim is to really eliminate and destroy the plutonium and the long-lived waste from society. We can't get rid of everything because no process is perfect, and there's still spent fuel waste at the end of our reactor. When we shut down our reactor, the spent fuel that's there in the core has to be disposed of somewhere. So we can either put it into another reactor, or theoretically that goes round and round again. You have one reactor left, and of course the spent fuel from our reactor goes back around into the process again. So it's essentially a loop. We start off with converted traditional spent fuel. The spent fuel that comes out of our reactor goes back around again, gets topped up with more traditional spent fuel, and that cycle goes on and around and around and around for the full 60-year life, continually reducing that spent fuel. So a little
awesome.
technical
That's
there,
great.
but that's it's
No, I think it was a great summary. I'll say it back because I find it helps me learn, and hopefully it helps other folks too. But for people that don't know, I feel like it's such a common misconception, and it was for me. Like when people say spent nuclear fuel or waste, there's not a lot of, with other energy processes, a lot of the waste and products are all gases and liquids. Like this fuel comes out of a reactor and it's still in these solid metallic or ceramic rods, right? I mean, you say fuel, so I mean, you've got the uranium, still uranium, like literally solid metal, inside of, like you said, cladding that is also solid metal, right? And so your guys' process is taking these rods and then separating them from being, in a completed assembly, and then separating into kind of three separate product streams, just like you identified, right? The non-dangerous solid cladding and not spent uranium, and then the fission products that, like you said, you have to dispose of somewhere. But I think I find the industry does this often, where we say products, but relative to the amount of waste that every other energy generation source generates, like it's just so little and microscopic that there's comparatively no waste. And then grabbing the nuclear still fuel that you can still burn and it's still valuable, right? And it's kind of this process of closing the fuel cycle. I'd like to kind of double click on the reprocessing piece. You mentioned it generates plutonium weapons grade, and this hasn't been done historically because of that, but this is kind of a different way to frame the problem, in my opinion, where we're leading the world in developing a solution to make sure that this material doesn't become a weapon, right? And you've got a good process to be able to do that with, right?
Yeah, and so just to be unequivocal about this, the process cannot produce weapons grade plutonium. That is absolutely fundamental. We have to demonstrate that, and that'll be in the public eye. We're going to make sure our data is public. We'll have peer-reviewed academic reviews to really demonstrate that. It's a very heavily regulated sector, so you have oversight from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the International Atomic Energy Agency to verify that and make sure it is true. One thing I just wanted to mention on waste, there's people in the industry that kind of don't understand why we're doing this, because in what I've heard recently from some people, which I quite like, is their favorite thing about nuclear power is the waste, because it's the only industry where the waste is all accounted for. The nuclear waste has never killed anybody. And I don't remember what's the numbers from fossil fuels is 7 million a year dying just directly from the gases produced. So nuclear waste really isn't a big issue. We know how to deal with it. We can store it. We have plans to dispose of it safely. Canada has a very established program to put it into a deep geological repository, and that plan works. It's costed. It's safe. It's fine. Waste is still perceived to be a very big issue socially. So our aim is to improve the waste situation by reducing it, improve that social license of nuclear, so we can really open the door to other technologies so that nuclear can really prosper. This is not a magic technology. We can't get rid of all waste altogether, but we can certainly make a big difference using that recycling and using that waste and reducing the legacy issue.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to characterize it. And especially, I mean, every company has to have a social license to operate and kind of a strategy to deal, especially in the energy space, not just nuclear, but deal with kind of the public eye, and how do you sell yourself to the public and provide yourself as a service. And so I like your guys' strategy with, well, we're going to address the waste issue kind of head on, but at its core, I mean, it's helpful for your social license to operate, but that's not also kind of the most valuable piece of using spent nuclear fuel for you guys, right? It's kind of an economic decision too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it definitely would have been easier if we chose a reactor that was fueled by regular uranium. I mean, that would have been the easy path. Sometimes I kind of wake up thinking, why did we take this hard path? But it is really important to tackle it. We have had a lot of kind of interesting success because people are excited about this. The public is excited about this. So the reactor itself is sort of normal economic case. It looks to be a very competitive reactor, that it can be produced quite low cost and then produce electricity, normal business model. On the waste side of things, there is huge liabilities in each country to dispose of the spent fuel liability. So in Canada, for example, the current estimate is around $26 billion Canadian to dispose of the nation's spent fuel. Well, if we're successful, we can reduce the amount of spent fuel that either needs to go into the deep geological repository and reduce the cost and complexity of their facility, saving costs, or in the extreme case, have an even simpler type of repository design to deal with it. And the savings can be very significant. In the US, there's currently $45 billion sitting in the reserve fund to deal with the US spent fuel. Nobody has an actual estimate of what it's going to cost, but it's going to be an awful lot more. So the economics of reducing the cost of that are very, very compelling. So we've really got two business models. There's the economics and regular business case for the reactor, and then the reactor will buy fuel from the waste facility, which has its own economic case and sort of a tipping fee. The WATSS facility can, in its current form, produce fuel for any other molten salt reactor. So that there's potentially a business there, or with modification, potentially fuel for other reactors too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's very noble and smart, like good business for you guys to be addressing that. I mean, most, I'll say, nuclear vendors and energy companies, from solar to wind and oil and gas and all of it, right, kind of viewed their end of life as, well, this doesn't really matter and we're just going to push this out forever. We see that in oil and gas a lot, which is really sad. But there's a lot of old orphan wells and wells that don't get plugged, because when you run the economics, you're like, well, this project's going to last 30 to 40 years, and at the end of life, it's going to be $30,000 to plug this well, and we just tack that on at the end. And when you derate it back with a discount, it's virtually no dollars, and so it's never really factored into the equation. But then when you actually get to the end of life, it often costs more than what you're kind of budgeting at the beginning of life. And so it sounds like you guys have identified that, just like you said, the liability piece, and want to use it as an asset to add value to both your business and the industry. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And, we are, of course, a business, so we have to be profitable. But we did start this out from, a twofold, climate change reasons, of course, but also the founders and the team are very passionate about energy security, energy poverty. So having a scalable, clean technology that's affordable for the developing world is very important, and nuclear is the only answer. So our view is if you don't deal with the waste, nuclear won't be able to prosper properly.
Gotcha. Okay. Before we kind of move on to the broader energy industry, because I definitely want to get your perspective of that, and that's almost a great segue. But is there anything else that you want to mention about the reactor or the grid infrastructure system that you guys are working on?
Well, the other bit that is very important that we don't often talk about is our third technology, grid reserves. So the reactor produces heat 24 hours a day, but instead of it being a variable, which basically means you ramp down, we have a energy storage facility so that we can store the heat from the reactor and use the whole power plant as a peaking plant. So for example, if the reactor produces heat 24 hours a day and it stores that heat in large tanks of molten salt for, say, 16 hours a day, if you then have, and let's say that's a 500 megawatt reactor, and you have a 1500 megawatt steam turbine, you can run at that capacity for a third of the day. So you can run at 8 hours a day, taking the 16 hours of heat stored over here and 8 hours of heat from the reactor, acting as a peaking plant. So you now, nuclear power can become a peaking plant, running at like a 30% capacity factor. What we sell is a fixed standard reactor design, and the customer can have whatever size storage or turbine they want, depending on their needs. And some of them just want baseload, but some find that storage very, very valuable, typically if they have a larger renewable sector on the grid. That technology, unfortunately, don't have IP around that. It's just sort of an application that we've applied because it's available from the concentrated solar power sector already. We've very strong IP on the reactor and the watt side, but it's really important in a future grid. And if you want expanded renewables, the cost of this storage is about 10 times lower than the US DOE's lowest future theoretical cost of battery storage. Storing heat is incomparably cheaper than electric battery storage. And you can get a very reliable grid. If you have, you can have sort of 60% renewables and 30 to 40% this peaking plant nuclear, and you don't need any other fancy grid backup, spinning reserve, batteries. You've got a very reliable grid with that mix.
Can I say that back? Make sure I heard that correctly. Like the DOE's estimate is that this process 10 times cheaper than what current battery technology could offer for energy storage. Yeah, that's incredible. And even though you guys don't have the IP to it, I think it's really intelligent having that as part of your offering as an organization to be experts in, hey, this is how you would couple it. Yeah, real smart. I was curious, how hot do you guys plan to operate your reactors? I mean, is it hotter than kind of typical light water reactors?
It is, yeah. Light water reactors, the output temperature is around 300 degrees Celsius because they're using water as a coolant, and we are high temperature. So all molten salt reactors are high temperature. Our output temperature is around 550 Celsius. Could be a little higher depending on the.
Yeah, that makes sense with the salt system. Then with your efficiencies and how much you're going to lose along the way. That's why at the higher temperatures you can have that auxiliary system paired with it. So
yeah, we can go up to about 630, but the salts that are available for those storage at the moment limit us to around 550. It's likely that there'll be new, better salts around by the time we're up and running. That'll increase that temperature, but yeah, that ballpark, which is important for industrial applications.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if somebody's listening who, say, perhaps is from a coal community, or is in a state or part of a legislator, regulator, government official that is thinking about, well, we'd like to convert this coal plant to a nuclear power plant. How could Moltex fit into that equation?
Well, yeah, it would be a real shame if the coal facilities are not used and retrofitted for nuclear power. High temperature reactors like ours are particularly well suited to coal conversion because the steam turbines that they use are basically identical because the output temperatures are in the same range, superheated steam. So yeah, for high temperature nuclear, it absolutely makes a lot of sense, especially if a lot of the turbines are pretty new in a lot of cases. So we'd reuse that, but the big value is the grid connections for a coal plant, because getting new grids, new cabling and infrastructure. I mean, we think building nuclear power plants are hard, but building new grid infrastructure is arguably even harder, certainly from a social license perspective. So we really want to maximize the existing infrastructure that's there, and any nuclear reactor can utilize that existing infrastructure. So it is a huge opportunity. Of course, there's a lot of jobs around those the coal facilities. So it would also be a real shame not to be able to retrain and use the skills that are there in the area for nuclear power plants, because almost all nuclear facilities still need a lot of people to operate them.
Yeah, I want to highlight kind of the grid connection piece, because I know at least in America, there's a ton of renewable developers that want to tie into those grid connections, which I think is really bad for society. Like, I'll be explicit about it. Like, just like you said, it doesn't, or it's hard to get those grid connections in place, and nuclear would replace kind of the dependable, deployable power, and there would still be people working in that community to operate this plant. Versus if you replace those grid connections with renewables, you'll have intermittent power that is unreliable, undependable, and while carbon free at the moment, won't provide additional jobs in that community. And so, yeah, I think nuclear kind of solves all of those problems. That gives you a reliable source for it. So,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be quite so negative against renewables, but there are varying opinions of it. What I'm quite a fan of is the offshore wind opportunity is really phenomenal. In coastal areas. I was just reading there some of the recent the new offshore wind projects in Ireland and England. They're 300 meters. That's like 1,000 feet.
They're huge. Yeah,
And
they're
it's
big.
just that strong, and the reliability of those is great because the higher they go, the more constant wind speeds they have. So that's very encouraging, and the costs are going down fast. But as you say, it's not enough. That's part of the puzzle.
Right. So how big could Moltex become? I mean, you guys work on getting your license now, but and your design review, but how big could this system scale?
So talking about Multex Canada, Multex Energy, that the company that I lead, we are focused on the spent fuel market. So
Mhm.
markets that have a spent fuel stockpile or challenge, whatever you want to call it. So our market is kind of limited by that. In Canada, the amount of spent fuel with the current fleet, the CANDUs, can is enough for to have between 6 and 8 gigawatts, 6 to 8,000 megawatts of our reactors running for 60 years. The spent fuel from our reactors could then be used again and so on. But as assumed for the first fleet, 6 to 8 gigawatts. In the US, it's about 20 to 25 gigawatts. Globally, it's over 120 gigawatts. So that's really the size. At the moment, we're the only ones in the market. So that's the market we're going for is that full market. Um, the I mentioned briefly our sister company in the UK, Moltex Flex. They have a very similar reactor technology, molten salt contained in fuel pins, but they use regular low enriched uranium. So the market for that is kind of endless, essentially. And
Yeah.
and the big win would really be if there's those coupled solution. You have a thermal spectrum, regular uranium reactor rolled out at scale, and then the waste burner together. There's the opportunities it's limitless, the opportunity, and it doesn't have to be that technology. There'll be a lot of other small modular reactors, and we want to be the waste recycler for them too. And so those numbers I gave you are without any expansion of nuclear power. If nuclear power expands, we want the waste.
Yeah, I love how you characterized it. That's the current total available market, but as nuclear power expands, and I'm very bullish, and I think it will, and becomes a larger piece of the energy mix. I mean, it's only 10% globally now, and so you've got a chance to 10x this supply system. That's just at current energy supplies, meaning energy will continue to grow and has grown kind of over all of humanity. And I mean, which is a good thing, right? It makes lives better everywhere, and hopefully will help us kind of get off Earth and go far beyond. But yeah, so I think that's excellent. Um, what what kind of economic benefits might be realized from your guys' system if you were to move into a community?
Well, looking at the macro, you're talking about getting off Earth there. Looking at the macro side, I'm very passionate. The objective is getting the last 10% of Earth that's in poverty, out of poverty, and that is
Yeah.
and that's energy. Energy is directly correlated to prosperity, and as I think you're probably going to talk about in other sessions, as we have developed more energy, so coal and fossil fuels, we have got more of the population out of poverty, but we're not there yet. So we need another form of energy that is scalable, affordable, and clean. And that has to be, I mean, renewables are certainly a part, but not enough, as we've said a few times. That needs to be nuclear power for Africa, for India, for Southeast Asia, these countries that need the same opportunities that the West had 50, 100 years ago with coal and steam.
That's awesome. So, as leader of this organization and thought leader in the industry, if you could have one piece of advice, or say, well, let's take one step as a society to build more nuclear, perhaps in those places or in Canada, what would it be?
So there has been huge progress in the last year in terms of realizing that nuclear is needed, and the industry and governments are kind of going in the right direction to make sure that there's streamlined regulations, things be done quickly. So that's the momentum's building there. And we need to have reactors developed so people can have trust and confidence that they operate safely and they're running. But I think the longer term big shift, it will be when there's real science behind the actual health effects of radiation. At the moment, there's sort of I think after World War II, there was an arbitrary decision that all radiation is bad. Of course, we know with great confidence that a lot of radiation is very definitely bad for you, but we don't know.
Just like a lot of gravity, right? From large heights.
A lot of gravity is bad. Yeah, a lot of sun radiation is very bad for your skin. You absolutely need low levels of solar radiation to have healthy cells. There is so originally there was what's called the linear no threshold model, where low levels of radiation were defined as bad and harmful, and all regulation is based on that no level is good. But the likelihood is that we need low levels of radiation for our cells to repair properly. The problem is it's very hard to get real science behind that. So I'm really excited about the kind of small scientific field where they're looking at the low levels of effective radiation, and then having rules based on that real science-based, evidence-based radiation effects that would really change things and allow society to prosper. So that's the big one, but that's a long time away. You've got to have reactors running safely. You've got to have real data and evidence behind that before that to change. But that's a 20, 30 year timeframe.
Sure.
Before you move on, I just wanted to come back to the economic piece, if you don't mind, because I talked about the macro effects, but that's not really very kind of meaningful to real projects. What we're focused on very firmly is getting a facility up and running in New Brunswick as soon as possible, and the economic benefits to the leaders in New Brunswick for taking the charge and building this first are significant. Not just what we can bring, but it's the whole ecosystem of supply chain and jobs. And so the estimates that the nuclear community here have put together is done independently is 730 jobs per year over 15 years. $1 billion Canadian in gross domestic product to the provincial economy, and then $120 million in provincial government revenue. So pretty significant. And countries need to decide, are they going to be buyers or sellers? And New Brunswick has decided. Other countries need to also decide. But the real opportunity is when you're developing a technology and exporting it.
That's incredible. What a boom for that part of the world. That's going to be awesome. Okay, well, we're almost up on our time, so I have to ask, what advice do you have for, let's say, politicians or key stakeholders in communities that might be thinking about wanting to build more nuclear?
Yeah, so I think the advice I have is this is urgent. I mean, we all know there's a climate crisis, but we're still not really acting like it's urgent. And it's really a shame that the war in Ukraine has actually kind of given some urgency. I mean, for climate, it's a good thing, but it's a shame that it had to be a war that caused that. But we need to act fast. And my message would be bold, make bold decisions. It's the only way we're really going to deal with this. We have to take risks. Not everything is going to work, but you'll have a lot of success if you're not bold and aggressive. Other countries are going to get there first, and we're not going to solve this. We're not going to solve this problem.
Right. I think that's a fantastic spot to end it. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having you. And on a positive note, people are talking about the big climate catastrophe and fear mongering, but we have already avoided the worst of climate change. The original predictions from the 90s showed massively increasing greenhouse gases, and it could have been a lot worse. So we have had huge success of it. I think we need to pat ourselves on the back for that, but it's not over. We have a long way to go. So I'm very optimistic. Thank you very much for having me, Mark. That was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I am too. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.